Lane Kiffin snuck another one on campus. All of your recruits are belong to us. This is the Locked On Ole Miss podcast.
You are Locked On Ole Miss, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hi, I'm Stephen Willis, a former staff member at Ole Miss and a 10-year veteran member of the national media with Yahoo Sports. Also did a little time at WSMV. Thank you for joining us today. Today on the show, we tell you that Lane Kiffin snuck another visitor on campus, and that makes about 40% of the 2023 Joe Moore Offensive Line of the Year that's currently on Ole Miss's campus. As I mentioned, I'm Stephen Willis, and this is the Locked On Ole Miss podcast, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We're free and available on all the podcast apps and YouTube. Thank you for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen, and a special hello to the everydayers that make the show what it is. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. All right. Really interesting stuff. Ole Miss snuck a third visitor on. We have talked about Nate Kalepo, and we've talked about BJ Green, and those are massive potential gets for Ole Miss, but a third visitor came on to Ole Miss's campus at about the same time, and it was a player that not a lot of people knew about. It was Julius Beulow, a guard from the University of Washington. If that sounds familiar, so is Nate Kalepo. Both of them are guards. Julius started the last 6 or 7 games for the Washington Huskies at guard. So he started half the season for the 2023 Joe Moore Offensive Line of the Year Washington Huskies. Nate Kalepo also did that. So if you do the math, that is 2 out of 5 or 40% of the Joe Moore Offensive Line of the Year that is currently visiting Ole Miss. This is not a small feat. Everybody needs to realize exactly where that sits. He is 6'8", 313 pounds. We talked about body types with Ole Miss football and how they want them to be bigger and harder to get around to help with the RPOs whenever the pass rush realizes what's going on and gets around them. Since this is a striking offense, you are looking at some way to slow the defensive round through the body type. And Ole Miss, 6'6" is almost a minimum height required to play offensive line at Ole Miss. They're usually about 350 pounds, although Julius is about 315. Really good player. Him, and if he comes with Nate Kalepo, all of a sudden the offensive line's in perfect condition. You'll have a situation where Ole Miss has added 4 offensive linemen to a unit that needed a little bit of help, but not a lot, because you do have players coming up through the ranks and Bryson Sanders and Preston Cushman, but like Diego Pounds and Jerquan Scott, and all of a sudden, if you get Nate Kalepo and Julius Beulow, you have a chance to be a little bit different this year, a little bit deeper, honestly. They could rotate a little more. You might be 9 or 10 deep on the offensive line. And this is not a unit that substitutes that often because of the tempo. It's not that. It's not that they don't or they can't. It's that the tempo is so important. They're okay with the way it's set up. So they're going to make sure the linemen are in really great shape and get them ready to go to play in an offense that moves that quickly. Washington, again, the Joe Moore Offensive Line of the Year in 2023, they gave up 12 sacks for the year in 15 games. That's less than a sack a game. And it's a situation where those two in the interior would be big helps for Ole Miss. Now, one problem that Ole Miss had last season, and we'll talk about this until the cows come home, is that when you look at the offensive line in the interior positions, if Caleb Warren got injured, there was a problem at center because you had to move people around, and all of a sudden one player getting injured on the internal results in 3 substitutions. That's one of the reasons Ole Miss is going out of their way to recruit these kids. Like I said, Julius Beulow from Washington, number 77. He's there. Nate Kalepo is there. BJ Green on the defensive side of the ball is there. And I told everybody, Ole Miss had to get to the point to where this weekend it started, and the weather kind of got in Ole Miss's way a little bit. Let's be real about the weather and what's going on, because Ole Miss was in position to do a little damage this weekend, but that weather slowed it down, so they had to bring these players in on Monday and get them on campus. School starts on Thursday. The drop ad date has been pushed back to like February 3rd. There's still some damage that can be done. But when you look at Julius Beulow, he started left and right guard over the course of the season. That shows versatility. That's the reason I put this tweet up. And if he started the last 6 games, that means he kind of rose to the occasion. And for what would be a pretty good Washington unit that made it to the national championship game. Now, they didn't win the national championship, but they were in it in the fourth quarter. They were in that game. And that score looks like a blowout, but they were a holding call on a big pass play away from that looking completely different. You know, if you look at Julius Beulow as a prospect, he was a 4-star. He was out of Hawaii. Like I said, 6'8", 313, really big-time player. He doesn't have stars and everything right now. But just remember, when you look at these players, you can't judge completely based off what a former accountant says in Nashville, Tennessee. You kind of have to make your own evaluations. But Julius Beulow is a good football player. I'm pretty excited about the potential for Ole Miss. Now, we are in that time of the year to where you're not looking for somebody to commit 2 weeks down the road. You're not going to have a situation like it was with Walter Nolan, with everybody freaking out because he took 9 days to decide. No, it's going to be quick turnaround type stuff. You might find out in the next 24 to 72 hours about all 3 of these players and whether or not they commit to Ole Miss. Now, I do think it's just kind of my heart of heart. Now, I'm just worried about it, and it's just because of what I've seen that's been going on in recruiting, is that Ohio State is trying to mount a campaign, at least their fans, for this player. So Ole Miss, theoretically, hopefully they can close this down with both Kalepo, Beulow, and BJ Green over the course of the next couple of days. Like I said, by the time you watch this, something could have happened. I don't know. Everything's going to go really quickly over the next couple of days, and I can't refilm every time something like that happens. So just understand that in the course of time of where I am, there might be stuff that happens after I film. Seriously. Anyway, tonight I'm going to the Brass Tap in Lakeland, Florida to meet Ole Miss fans. Honestly, David Holly set this up. I do appreciate it. I'm going to be here with Jeb Beecham from SEC After Dark, and we're going to talk Ole Miss sports. We're going to drink some beer, and we're going to have a good time. So if you're in the Central Florida area, feel free to stop by. We'll be there about 5:30 Eastern to about 7 o'clock Eastern time as well. And we'll have beer. We'll talk some ball. We'll do all of that good stuff as well. Should be a lot of fun, honestly. But Julius Beulow being snuck onto campus, because, you know, that's the way we're going to phrase it. He got snuck onto campus. Really good football player, him and Nate Kalepo and BJ Green. Huge potential additions for the this Ole Miss roster that has, honestly, all the hype and everything in front of it. It would be a sad day if all 3 of those committed to Ole Miss. It'd be a sad day for people that are but fans. It'd be rough on them that they're secretly rooting for something bad to happen so they can go, aha, see, I told you. No. If Ole Miss gets all 3 of these, they're going to be in the best position that I can remember coming out of a transfer portal signing day or anything, roster period, at the end of this transfer portal window, to the point where maybe in the secondary window, Ole Miss is in shopping for a running back. And we're going to talk about a couple of names that we should probably pay attention to in just a second. I do want to let you know Thanks again for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen of the day. We're just getting started. We're moving to the end of the transfer portal window, but there are still some names to watch, particularly running backs. We'll tell you who they are. The NFL regular season has wrapped up and they're in the playoffs, but there's still a little time to get in on the action with FanDuel. It's America's #1 sports book. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. That's $150 in bonus bets, win or lose. The app is so easy to use, and there's so many different ways to bet, like same game parlays, to where you just pick three different. You can go money line, you can do spread. You can say that, I don't know, Patrick Mahomes is going to throw for more than 275 yards in the NFC Championship game. Stuff like that. But me, I'm not the most creative person in the world, so I need the new Explore tab that they have where you find interesting bets. And also you can make parlays in the Parlay Hub. That's another one where you figure out which bets to string together and what some of the most popular parlays are. You can choose those as well. They have many, many more things as well. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make your first bet a layup. FanDuel, an official partner of the NFL. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows that cover every single league. Go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. All right, so we are inching towards the end of the transfer portal window. Remember, drop ad date is probably, I think it's like around February 2nd to 4th, somewhere in there. It's going to go. But either way, it's this weekend is going to be a weekend before the drop ad date. So it would not surprise me if somebody came in this weekend. Now, we don't know any particular names. We're all kind of guessing. But if Julius Beulow and Nate Kalepo and BJ Green all commit to Ole Miss, okay? And you look at the roster of where it sits, there's pretty much only one position to where Ole Miss would probably take a chance this late in the transfer portal window on somebody if they popped, if that makes sense. And these are some names that you need to watch potentially. And there's some other names that are not in the transfer portal that we're keeping an eye on as well. But if something breaks, we will talk about them as well. But let's talk about some players that are in the transfer portal. And we'll start with Quali Conley. He's from San Jose State. San Jose State's coach just ended up at Arizona taking that job. Quali Conley entered the transfer portal. He was a running back that was at like Utah Tech. He was a lower division running back. And after Cody Schrader had his day last season, and basically by the end of the year, it just became unstoppable, essentially. You can think that small-time running backs, especially when you're not looking for a person to be the guy, there's not a one-for-one replacement for Quinshon Judkins in the portal, but you're trying to get 2,600 yards and 29 touchdowns between several running backs and a quarterback. You can get that with Quali Conley. He's a running back from San Jose State, end up with 842 yards, 9 touchdowns. He ranks second among Mountain West players with 130 plus carries and yards per carry at 6.4 yards. Good running back. I'm interested to see what he'll do. He's likely going to follow his coach to Arizona, especially since Joni Coleman went to Washington, but he is a player that you should probably keep an eye on. If we're looking for the running back that can do some of the dirty work. I don't know if Ole Miss is recruiting a Snoop Connor or a Henry Parrish. I think they're looking for one of those. And when you have Ulysses Bentley IV, he's Jaron Ely on speed, essentially. And you have Kedrick Criscano, who in my opinion has a chance to be a Henry Parrish Jr. type running back. So I think you're looking for a Snoop Connor, which in the course of the season, Logan Diggs might be that player. I don't know if he will be that player, but he might be that player. But I think Ole Miss needs another one just to be safe. And somebody like Quali Conley could fit that bill as well. Now, another running back that is interesting is former South Carolina running back Rashad Amos, who entered the transfer portal last year from South Carolina and went to Miami of Ohio. He ended up rushing for over 1,000 yards at Miami of Ohio and got back in the transfer portal right before the new year. He's still in there. Good football player. He has not come in for a visit. Now, just so everybody knows on this stuff, one of the things I go by is who is following who on social media. And this is a situation to where Jackson Dart is following Rashad Amos on Instagram. And that situation, along with some other running backs that are not quite in the portal at this point, you have a situation where Rashad Amos is in there. So he might be somebody that Lane Kiffin and Charlie Weiss Jr. looks at as a potential option. There's a lot of interesting running backs that are in the portal right now. They may not be a stylistic match for what you're doing. I'm not 100% sure of a system match of a running back. Now, if you're looking for a Snoop Connor, for instance, Rashad Amos would be that guy. But if you're looking for more of an all-around guy, there's some other players that are not in the portal that might end up showing up in April. So do you take the bird in the hand? We had this conversation yesterday about the bird in the hand. Or are you willing to ride with what you have to see what's there April 15th to April 30th and get ready for the summer? Would you be willing to do that? Now, here's my thing that I've noticed over the last 3 years. Transfers that come in January, Ole Miss has almost a 90% hit rate in transfers that come in January right now. Unbelievably impressive what their scouting department, everybody has done. Whenever they have players that don't hit, that aren't quite there, it's the players that come in the later window, the summer transfers. You're trying to get them acclimated into your culture and what you're doing. These are players like Jalen Robinson, who was here 2 years ago as a wide receiver, didn't quite work out for any reason. Jordan Watkins ended up being the slot receiver. That did work out, but Jalen Robinson was the player that was penciled in to be that position. And Zachary Franklin. Everybody, including myself, thought Zachary Franklin was going to be the dude. He came in the summer. He had the problem with his injury. He needed surgery. Didn't quite come back from surgery. Didn't quite make it. Didn't have the time to get it done. And these are just players that were signed in that later transfer portal window. Now, I think Ulysses Bentley is a player that came over in that window 2 years ago as well, but he ended up getting injured in his first season. So for a one and done, I don't know if I'm going to put so much expectations on a player that transfers mid-year, not mid-year, end of year, in the summer. The players that I'm going to be looking at are the ones that are going in the winter window, the ones that are coming in December and January. Those are the players that I'm going to go ahead and set with expectations and be ready to go. You know, I'm expecting Walter Nolan to come in and perform and be really good. I'm expecting Princely Amon Mielen to come on and be really good. I'm expecting Poop Hall to be really good. I'm not going to have the same expectations for the players that come in the later window. Now, there could be players there that can help Ole Miss. I'm not saying that's not possible. I'm saying for my expectations, I'm going to put a little bit more on these players than those players, if that makes sense at all. Anyway, when we come back, we are going to continue our series on getting to know JUCO players with Raymond Collins. Real quick, let me read this real quick. Still more to come on Locked On Ole Miss, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We continue our Get to Know Your segment with Raymond Collins and tell you why he has a good chance of seeing the field in year one. Thanks again for making Locked On Ole Miss your first listen of the day, and shout out to the everydayers. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows that cover every league. For your second listen, go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 stream channel. Be part of history. Now, we talked about the transfer portal, and some good old-fashioned recruiting happened as well. And with the transfer portal and high school recruiting, the people that get the most lost, for lack of a better word, are JUCOs. And we started last week with breaking down video from Cedric Beavers. And today we're going to move on to his teammate, Raymond Collins. He's a linebacker. He's actually a decent sized linebacker at 6'2", 235 pounds. And if you look at him, honestly, let's just go to the highlights right now. If you look at him, you can first thing notice is how smooth he moves and how well he moves around. He's a person that went to Harrison Central in Mississippi. That's in Harrison County, obviously, Gulfport, essentially. And he's a guy that developed a little bit late, ended up at Jones County Junior College. And if you notice him, he is really good at getting off blocks and playing angles, and he can go sideline for sideline. It's a situation that even with TJ Dudley, even with Pooh Paul, even with Suntaran Perkins, I think Raymond Collins has a chance to make some noise in the linebacker room year one. He's got a little bit of size to him at 235 pounds. He's a larger linebacker. It might be a situation where you see Pooh Paul and Raymond Collins on the field at the same time because of what they can do, especially against teams that are going to line up and run the football on you. You want to stand up against Georgia? This is the body type you're looking for. And he has the athleticism to go sideline to sideline. And many times you will see running backs trying to get to the edge, and you can't outrun him. He does a good job of getting off the blocks and heading down the football line, down the line to the sideline. And honestly, he's quick enough to where he runs them down pretty fast. So he's a really, really good football player. And if you see what's going on, man, if you just look at the way he gets in and out of blockers and goes through traffic to make plays, that is the type of instinctual stuff that is not normal on that level. It's a situation most of the time when you're a linebacker, you're taught what to do, your keys. You do this if this happens. You do this if this happens. He has a good job of knowing where he needs to be and in the right area, but also able to contort his body in certain ways to get through small cracks and make sure he doesn't get blocked in a solid manner. Really good linebacker. Like I said, sideline to sideline, making plays in the backfield. He does a decent job in coverage, and he's 235 pounds. And whenever you put all of those together, he has a chance to be a really, really decent player for Ole Miss moving forward. Like I said, Pooh Paul is here. TJ Dudley, Suntaran Perkins, Kari Coleman. There's a lot of people. Tyler Banks. They really like Tyler Banks. There's a lot of players in that room that Raymond Collins is going to have to push through. But Raymond Collins has the talent to actually do it. And it starts, I think he's there in the spring. Spring practice is going to be very important for Raymond Collins. It's going to be a lot better when you go through spring. And everybody likes to talk down on spring practice. Everybody likes to talk down on that. But as we can see right now, spring track practice is probably more important than it has ever been. And it's not important on installs and things like that. It's important on how things are done. Cultures, all of the classroom stuff starts in February as opposed to in August. And you can learn and get a lot more stuff in your system. And that's going to help a JUCO style linebacker. Now, when you recruit a JUCO, like Cedric Beavers, like Raymond Collins, like Deion Smith, like Marquis Willis, you're recruiting them to come in and play. You don't recruit depth pieces necessarily from the junior college rank. You can get those players from the transfer portal, honestly. But these players obviously are making plays to the point where they've caught Lane Kiffin's eye, and he is okay with bringing them on board and letting them contribute early. It's going to be a big deal for Raymond Collins. It's going to be a big deal for Cedric Beavers if they can come in and prop up even more those rooms that are already good, but they have a chance to be really good. And both of these players, they move so well. If you look at the athleticism that Cedric Beavers and Raymond Collins has, it's off the charts. It's next level. And I think that can be the advantage that gets both of them on the field in year one. Really interesting stuff. That athleticism is huge. You have a situation where Raymond Collins is 8th in the country in JUCOs and Cedric Beavers is 5th in the country in JUCOs. And those players are going to be really, really important for Ole Miss football, honestly. So I do hope everybody enjoys that. Remember, tonight, no Shark Tank Live. You have an interview with Michael Katz, but no Shark Tank Live. I will be going to the Brass Tap in Lakeland, Florida, to meet up with some Ole Miss fans and talking a little bit of ball. Little meet and greet set up at the Brass Taps in Lakeland, Florida. I do appreciate David Holly for setting that up. And if anybody wants to show up, I'll be there from 5:30 p.m. Eastern to about 7 o'clock p.m. Eastern time as well. But we'll have a beer, we'll talk some ball and do all that. Jeb Beecham from SEC After Dark will be there as well. Should be a lot of fun. I haven't done many meet and greets like this just because of where I am, but they convinced me to try it, so I'm giving it a try as well. So I hope everybody has a good time there. Thanks for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen every day as we continue to turn our attention to the portal and the visitors. And we're also looking to get right in a game versus the Arkansas Razorbacks tomorrow night. For your second listen, Go Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On with the national shows that cover every single league. For your second listen, go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 stream channel. For those of you on YouTube, we'll send you there right now. Hotty toddy.